All right, it's a Friday, but this has certainly been a very busy week, especially politically. Now, on Monday, former NPA boss Shaun Abraham's appointment was declared unconstitutional. And following the death of Mama Zondeni Sobukwe, we were further shown the divisions within the PAC as well. And then this is, of course, a party that her husband, Robert Sobukwe, helped to found. And 6 years since Marikana, what are the political implications amongst others in the Platinum Belt? And joining me from our Pretoria studios right now is political analyst Professor Somadoda Fikeni. Professor, thanks so much for speaking to us this morning here on Morning Live.
Thank you for inviting me, and greetings to your viewers.
Professor, let's start with the big story at the beginning of the week, which was, of course, the NPA and Shaun Abraham, of course, now no longer the NDPP. But a very interesting judgment there from the Constitutional Court. And now we have Dr. Silas Ramaite acting in this capacity, not for the first time. So do tell us, what are your views on that situation?
Well, I do think that it is a reflection of political interference and how unstable the leadership of the NPA has been for the last decade or two, because perhaps it needs some review of the manner of appointing leaders into that particular position, especially the rise of corruption within the state institutions where leaders are involved seem to correlate with the weakening of these institutions, hence the patronage networks of getting weaker persons.
Professor, if you look at what Glynis Breitenbach of the DA says, and she, of course, also formerly worked for the NPA, and she says she worked with Ramaite, and he, while he is qualified, most definitely, he sat idle while the NPA was being undermined by successive decisions of poor leadership.
Remember that at times people who are in these institutions do not have as much power as people at the helm. Some of them begin to understand and even appreciate what was happening when they are in these top positions, especially when you see that the top leaders do work with the leaders in the political spheres. Many of the professional public employees, they simply sit back and do their work. So that might have been the case in this particular case.
And just looking at the NPA going forward, I mean, you said there needs to be definitely some interrogation into how the leadership there is actually selected, but also in terms of being the right person. Dr. Silas Ramaite, would you give him the nod, or what is your take on that? Should it be someone new, or could they look within the ranks that they currently have there?
I do think that you need an overhauling of the NPA by bringing in highly respected figures in the legal field who will come in and bring some freshness, because over time, the institutional culture, the politics within NPA may make it very difficult for the person who has always been inside the NPA to change their course. And they might also carry their own baggage, or they might be viewed as belonging to this or that faction within the NPA itself. So it is very important to get somebody from outside.
And then the other story, of course, yesterday marking the 6th anniversary of the Marikana massacre. And there was a report that was released this week by researcher David Bruce. He was here on our show as well, author of that Marikana report. What are your views on how the situation has been dealt with? It's been 6 years on. There have been no arrests. And you look at not just Marikana, people will say life as Esidimeni as well, state capture inquiry. There have been no arrests to this point.
I do think that if this particular pattern after this tragedy, and the worst tragedy in the post-1994 democracy, if commissions are set up, millions are spent, only to have the wrapping around the wrist then you will have commissions that are still coming discredited before they take place. And it is very important that an action is seen to be taken. At the very least, the compensation of the widows of the families ought to have been speeded up so that at least there is some indication, but also the mining companies developing areas around their own vicinity. That is an urgent matter that should not just be left to government, but to the companies as well.
And what about President Cyril Ramaphosa and, of course, his role in all of this? Because he has been a central figure here.
I wouldn't necessarily say the commission put him as a central figure. Of course, because he's the most prominent political figure, it is unavoidable that going to the elections, he will be brought in as a central figure. He has played a role. He ought to go back to the community as he promised, and to do more than just the promise itself, to turn the situation around there and to see to it that this matter is expedited, especially the condition of families left behind. That, at the very least, would go a long way to signal that he is committed to the ultimate resolution of this matter.
And then just before we wrap this up, we unfortunately also learned of the passing away of another icon of the liberation struggle. And it almost sounds hollow to say it that way now, a struggle icon, when we did not acknowledge her. We did not acknowledge the role that Mama Sobukwe played until now.
The tragedy of South Africa has been that one, liberation movements have been at war with each other, even in exile. So if the party was not a ruling party, it would struggle to be acknowledged. But the second one, which is the worst tragedy, is how PAC leadership itself has been scrambling and fighting over a broken bone and nothing else but as to who is the leader of the party. And they have not done well to project the party itself. You remember that PAC was quite strong in its philosophy and ideology on the issue of land, but it is missing in action when the land issue is finally at the center of our debate. But for women, though, it seemed to be the case with women that we wait until they pass away to acknowledge them and to start reading their extensive obituaries.
Well, Prof, we're going to wrap it up. Just a final thought, your favorite Aretha Franklin moment?
Wow, there are so many moments. And that song, You Make Me Feel Like a Natural Woman, among other things. Remember, we grew up at the time when there was top 10, top 15, and she always featured. And I think she is immortalized. She may be silenced now, but her music will keep on singing.
Professor Somadoda Fikeni, thank you so much for helping us wrap the week that was, in terms of just taking another look at the stories that made headlines. We're going to go to